No one chooses where and to whom they are born to, but given the right circumstances, actions, and just a little bit of luck, we can drastically change our path and take control of our future. And in this video, I will share with you the 7 key steps to help you break the generational cycle of poverty. And stay tuned till the end where I share some exclusive tips that will help you along the way. But without further ado, let's get straight into the video. The reality of the situation is that nearly 385 million children live in extreme poverty. That is 385 million kids around the world. In 2019 alone, more than 10% of the American population, which is about 34 million people, lived in poverty, of which 10.5 million of them were children. According to researchers at Washington University in St. Louis, 60% of Americans between the age of 20 and 75 will spend at least 1 year of their life in poverty. As you can see, poverty is real. It is something that affects many of us. Some of us are born into poverty by no choice of our own, and others experience it at some point throughout their lifespan. But what is important to remember is that each one of us has the opportunity to change our destiny. This video isn't about waiting and relying on government, institutions, and international agencies to help us, or wait for them to actually follow through with their symbolic goals of ending poverty. No, this video is all about you and helping you take control of your life by giving you the necessary tools to help you rewrite history, your history. So regardless of how we ended up in poverty, these 7 steps will ensure that we never have to remain in it. Step number 1, and the first thing we need to do to break out of the generational cycle of poverty which we currently face, is to first accept it. The first step is acknowledging that there is indeed a problem and that changing it needs to be a top priority. You have to be mindful of the situation you are currently in and the path you are headed down in order to make any real changes in your life. You see, you can't fix a problem for which you see none. And too many times, poor people get really good at living their poor lifestyles. I'll say that again because I think it's super important. Too many times, poor people get really good at living their poor lifestyles. Sometimes, however, by no fault of their own, this lifestyle might be all they've ever known. But sometimes, it's by our own choices and decisions that we decide to remain in this lifestyle. There's a famous quote by Snoop Dogg which says, "You can take your boy out the hood, but you can't take the hood out your homie." You see, taking the man out the ghetto isn't always the most difficult part. Taking the ghetto out of him is. You see, many of us were born and raised a certain way. You're taught to talk a certain way, walk a certain way, and think a certain way. Your goals and ambitions are also often tied to this environment and this culture. And any deviation from these things are all too often frowned upon. In some cases, even success may be viewed in a negative light if how you acquire this success doesn't align with the views and values of those around you. This kind of environmental pressure will inherently consciously or subconsciously hinder and even halt a person's desire for success. But we ought to really sit down and visualize our current situation. Really think about your life. What will it be like if you continue to head down this path? What about your kids? What will your children's life be like? And their children? And their children's children? Is this the type of life that you want for them? For yourself? Because one thing is for certain, you cannot help others unless you help yourself first. And right now you are currently in no situation to help anyone. So things must change. Once you understand mentally, physically, and emotionally that you have no other option but to change, well, only then does the process of breaking generational poverty really begin. Step number 2, educate yourself. Educate yourself on the basics of financial literacy, which can be broken down into 5 core categories: earning, saving and investing, spending, borrowing, and protecting. Because to face one's enemy, one must know thy enemy. You have to analyze your life and break down your finances in order to first understand it, and secondly, to change it. Most people don't track their finances and subsequently have no idea how much money goes where. You need to break down your assets versus your liabilities, which is a fancy way of saying how much money you have coming in every month per se versus how much money do you have going out every month. For example, expenses such as rent, mortgage, food, transportation, subscriptions, utilities, entertainment, clothing, family, healthcare, and so on. Break down your finances in this way will paint you a very clear picture, and I guarantee that you will be shocked at how much money you spend unnecessarily that perhaps you could have saved or put to better use. Once you have identified your monthly income and expenses, you basically have three options. Either 1, you increase your income, 2, you reduce your spending, or number 3, incorporate both, which would be the ideal thing. Increase your income and reduce your monthly expenses all at the same time. Financial literacy is a very important topic that most likely wasn't taught to you by your poor parents by no fault of their own. They just perhaps simply lack the financial knowledge and wisdom. Financial literacy won't be learned in educational systems either, because they fail to address and educate poor people on one of the very reasons we attend their systems, which is to learn a trade so that we can make money. Ironic, isn't it? But that's a topic for another day. If you would like to learn the basics of financial literacy, do not worry. Like most things, it could be self-taught. You can learn all about it on the internet and on YouTube. There are also an abundance of courses out there, some better than others, so beware. There are also a few really good educational and insightful books that have personally changed my life and my perception of money, and I strongly recommend them if you would like to jumpstart your financial journey. And I will leave a link to some of these books in the description below if you would like to check them out. Step number 3 is change your mindset towards money. You see, there's a famous quote by Thomas Jefferson which says, "If you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done." You see, we cannot do the same things that the generation before us did and expect to have different outcomes. So many of us are still trapped in the old mindset of money, living paycheck to paycheck with a narrow and short-sighted vision that has become almost second nature by performing constant repetition of bad habits. If we want to achieve something great in life, we need to understand the importance of delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is simply having the ability to resist or postpone an immediate pleasure for a greater, more valuable reward later down the line. To highlight the importance and impact that delayed gratification has, in 1970, Walter Mischel, a professor of psychology at Stanford University, conducted the famous marshmallow experiment. Walter gathered a group of preschoolers aged 4 to 5 to conduct this experiment by bringing each child into a private room, sitting them down in a chair, and placing a marshmallow on the table in front of them. At this point, the researcher offered the children a deal. He told them that he was going to leave the room, and if they did not eat the marshmallow while he was away, then they would be rewarded with a second marshmallow. However, if the children decided to eat the first one before the researcher came back, then they wouldn't get a second marshmallow. So the choice was simple: 1 treat right now or 2 treats 15 minutes later. The researchers found that children who delayed their instant gratification and waited the 15 minutes for the second treat employed creative tactics, some sort of cognitive avoidance or suppression in order to restrain themselves, such as shifting their focus away from the treat and engaging in other activities, which would inherently shift their focus away from the tempting treat in front of them. This was an important finding, but the most important finding of all was the follow-up study performed years later, which tracked each children's progress. The findings were astonishing. The children who were willing to delay gratification and waited to receive the second marshmallow ended up having higher SAT scores, fewer behavioral problems, and a higher likelihood of being successful in generally all aspects of their life. In other words, this series of experiments proved that the ability to delay gratification was critical for success in life. And if you look around, we see this play out frequently in our day-to-day lives. For example, delaying the instant gratification of watching television to get your homework done, which means learning more and getting better grades. Or delaying the gratification of finishing your exercise workouts early for putting in a few more reps, which will in turn make you stronger and healthier. As you can see, we are faced with these tough decisions on a daily basis. Therefore, we need to shift our mindset and learn to delay instant gratification for future success. Before we get into tip number 4, I just wanted to say if you're enjoying the video and it's provided with any value thus far, please remember to like the video as it really helps us out. And stay tuned to the very end where I'll share with you 3 key exclusive tips that will maximize your chances of overcoming poverty. Now moving on to step number 4. Set clear and concise goals. If you plan to increase your income or decrease your spending, how will you go about this? Create a roadmap and a checklist for you to follow, something by which you can measure or gauge your success by. Firstly, tackle your goals in order of priority. This is different for each person. This is why personal finance is said to be personal, because it changes from individual to individual. What is important and works for me will not necessarily work for you. For example, my goal and path to financial stability might be first to cut back on all non-essential expenses, paying off any debts or loans that I may have. Then build a 6-month emergency fund, and after that start to slowly invest any extra income I have left over. But perhaps for you, it may be different. Perhaps you can't cut back on your expenses anymore. So your first step might be figuring out a way to increase your income, learning a new skill or trait, or even starting a side hustle. If you're unsure and want to learn how to set clear, concise goals and actually stick with them long enough to see results, make sure to go watch our video on why most New Year resolutions fail, so you avoid making some very costly mistakes. In that video, I also share some tips and tricks to help you along the way, so I highly recommend you go and check it out after this. But with that said, step number 5 is networking. Networking is surrounding yourself with the right people, those who are on the same path as you, or are in a better situation financially than you. Ask them questions and learn from them, from their success, from what worked for them, also from their mistakes, because as Warren Buffett once said, it's good to learn from your mistakes. It's better to learn from other people's mistakes. So become a sponge of information. Soak up as much as humanly possible and start to cut out or distance yourself from those who don't align with your current goals and aspirations, those who don't bring you value in your life, and those who don't lift you up, but instead bring you down. I know it's easier said than done, because these people might be those closest to you, family and friends you've known your entire life. But there's an important saying which says, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Because we essentially, consciously or subconsciously, become those who we hang out with. Remember that networking and the right network can be one of the most important tools in life. They can open doors beyond your wildest imagination. But moving on to step number 6, do not worry about rejection or failure. You could fail 100 times and it doesn't matter. Mark Cuban said, it doesn't matter how many times you fail. Remember, you only have to succeed once. So don't run from failure, embrace it. Do not be scared of failure, embrace failure, accept it and learn from it. Remember, failure is a road to success, and you are only one failure away from success. You cannot be concerned about the opinions of others, because here is the truth and reality of the situation. Nobody's going to believe in you until you have already done it. Nobody's going to come and celebrate with you until you have already done it. The work is going to have to come before the belief, which means you will have to work by yourself for a very long time, with no applause, with no award, with no one to tell you good job until you are successful. But on the contrary, you will constantly hear negativity. You'll constantly hear that you're wasting your time, that whatever you're doing will never work. Because what makes you any different? Why are you any special? The key is to tune out these negative stigmas and stay laser focused on your goals. Be resilient. Be hard-headed. Even remember the reason why you even started this in the first place. Step number 7, and changing gears for a second, is traditional education. Some of you may know where I stand and my beliefs on traditional education and its flaws, but being brutally honest and objective, I will say that for those starting off in poverty, traditional education presents one of the straightest paths out of poverty. With that being said, we do however need to be very careful with the system. Student debt is at an all-time high, reaching a record high of $1.58 trillion owed in student loan debts, with an average of about $39,000 owed per borrower, according to the Federal Reserve Bank. Over the past 3 decades, the average cost of attending a 4-year institution has more than doubled, and even tripled for public institutions. This means that obtaining a degree in this day and age requires a bigger financial sacrifice than it did a generation or 2 ago. So if you can avoid this setback, please do. Remember to take advantage of all the scholarship opportunities and financial aids available out there if you decide to embark on this journey. As promised, I have 3 key tips for you guys. Tip number 1. Focus your energy on what you can control. Too many times we get caught up worrying about things that are outside of our control that we lose sight of what is really important. So stay focused. Do not become distracted by external factors for which you have no control over. Because 9 out of 10 times, the things we are worrying about never turn out as bad as we make them out to be. This is why it is important for us to remain calm, breathe, and assess the situation with a clear mind. Because as I like to say, when emotions are high, logic is low. Tip number 2, stop comparing yourself to others. It is easier now more than ever to get caught up in the facade of montages people broadcast on social medias, making it easy for us to fall into the trap of comparing oneself. But we must remember to remain humble and tunnel visioned with our goals, not allowing external distractions to deviate us from our path. Instead, we use them as extra motivation and fuel to continue pushing us towards success. Tip number 3, use your time wisely. Time is our most precious non-renewable commodity and resource. Therefore, we should begin to treat it this way. Be selective and selfish to a certain degree with your time. Too many times we go through life as if every second and every day is guaranteed, and that's simply not the case. There were 150,000 people that woke up yesterday that didn't wake up today. That's 150,000 people that died yesterday. Not to be doom and gloom, but I'm just being honest. This is the reality of the matter. No one is guaranteed tomorrow, and if you live like this, you will start to put some urgency into your life. You will treat your time as precious. Waste less of it, and instead use it wiser. Use it to educate yourself, advance your career, start a side hustle, or use it to ultimately achieve your goal of breaking the generational cycle of poverty for you and those that will come after you. Now I have a question for those of you who have managed to make it out of poverty. How did you escape from poverty? Share your story in the comment section below so that our community knows that it is indeed possible. And for those of you who are currently battling poverty, let us know below if this video helped you out in any way. And remember, anything is possible if you believe in yourself and fight for what you believe in. So fight.